Hello everyone! Last week we began our trip down memory lane with the 15-year anniversary of World of Warcraft. Some old hits, some old bosses are making a return as we party with Chromie. Next up, we enter the Wrath of the Lich King era. As we discussed last week, the Lich King was sent over to Azeroth by the Burning Legion to help off kick another invasion of the world. It wasn't exactly a loyal minion, the Orc Ner'zhul that they used to create this powerful necromantic being. It had no love for Gul'dan or the Legion. Quite the opposite in fact. So under the watchful eye of the Dreadlords, he worked very hard on his own schemes, while pretended to be an ally to the Legion. In the cold lands of Northrend, the Lich King's power was rapidly growing. A truly terrifying army was being built. Most of Northrend's inhabitants, they were easily corruptible by the plague of undeath and his forces swelled in number, but it wasn't long before the Lich King faced his first real test. An ancient race of insectoids, they are called the Nerubians. They lived in Northrend and they were monstrally fierce in battle. With ties to the old god Yogg-Saron, they were no easy prey. Their grand kingdom, Azul Narub, stretched far beneath the frozen tundra. They were here far before the Lich King arrived, and he had no intention of allowing him to conquer them. Any attempts to spread the plague of undeath in their home, they were ruthlessly snuffed out by the Nerubians' leader. He was a powerful warlord named Anub'arak, and the Lich King saw no way to subvert their defenses. So instead, he settled on smashing the Nerubians into rubble. For years, the Lich King's undead army, they fought a war of attrition against the insectoids. Each one who fell was added to the Lich King's ranks, and when that end came, he was delighted to raise Anub'arak himself as a powerful undead minion. The former ruler was now a slave, unable to set himself free from the leash that binds him to the Lich King. In turn, the Lich King was so impressed by the Nerubians' resistance that he decided to adopt their architectural style and make it his own. If you played Warcraft 3, then you might remember Anub'arak guiding Arthas to where he was supposed to be. Guide him all the way to Icecrown Citadel, where he could merge with the Lich King. Anub'arak was also the one who showed Kel'Thuzad around Naxxramas, showing him the might and depravity that comes with teaming up with the Lich King. And it was too much, even for the Necromancer. When he saw what the Lich King was truly about, Kel'Thuzad tried to run, but by that time, it was already far too late. There would be no plots or schemes to fight back against the Lich King when dealing with such a mighty being. Not even death is a certainty, so Kel'Thuzad decided to bow down and pledge his allegiance. Fast forward a few years, and heroes of Azeroth would find their lands invaded by the ravenous scourge. Arthas the Lich King was taunting them to come to his domain, with the idea of slaying the most powerful heroes that the world had to offer. With them raised in undeath, under his command, nothing in this world of the living would be able to stand against him. But his dreams weren't accomplished quite yet. There were also heroes rising up under the guidance of Tirion Fordring, who wielded the mighty holy blade known as the Ashbringer. First target of assault was the Floating Citadel of Naxxramas. This fortress has been quite a problem before. You might recall going in there during Classic, or perhaps you're even looking forward to explore this place in its original glory for the very first time. What a time to live in, eh everybody? Either way, Kel'Thuzad and his loyal minions, they're inside, working for the master, the Lich King. They had to be taken out, and amongst them was Hagen the Unclean.
Clever and devious, Hagen the Unclean set up the halls of Naxxramas to poison unprepared adventurers. But dirty tricks like that wouldn't work on you, would they? You always did know how to watch your step.
The second boss of the Plague Quarter, and responsible for those many cauldrons you see scattered across the Plague Lands. Hagen the Unclean, he loves to throw a party, as during his fights, you need to do the safety dance.
We can dance if we want to, we can leave your friends behind.
At least, that's the way that I learned to fight back then. Became quite good at it as well, so hopefully those old dancing skills are still there. The idea behind it is that pain will rise up from the floor beneath you, and the room is divided into different sections. You need to make sure to stand on the right section, the one that won't hurt you, and you'll be fine throughout the fight. Learn the dancing steps to the right rhythm, and I remember a whole lot of people just failing this mechanic. It was glorious, and a fight that I'm really looking forward to doing once more.
I just love a good dance, don't you?
Champions were then later invited to the Argent tournament to figure out who was able and ready to join them in the assault upon Icecrown. We couldn't exactly just send in all that we had. Every fallen would just add to the Lich King's numbers. Countless heroes participated in the tournament's trials, while the Alliance and the Hordes, they weren't exactly on friendly terms with one another. Something about the Wrath Gates. Either way, what they didn't know was that
the Argent Crusade once held a grand tournament to find Azeroth's greatest heroes. But Anub'arak arrived uninvited. Turns out the Crusaders built the Colosseum on top of a buried Nerubian kingdom. That could only lead to eternal agony.
Not only did the Lich King yoink their architecture, like Naxxramas for example, the Nerubians, they've lived in Northrend for many, many years and they have a whole lot of tunnels underneath the land. Arthas even used one of them to reach Icecrown in time. And now, as he's the Lich King, he sends us down to these tunnels to rumble with none other than Anub'arak, traitor king to the Nerubian. When dealing with the Lich King, death is never a certainty. Anub'arak has been brought back quite a few times now. Who knows if he's finally found his eternal rest after his defeat right here. Doesn't matter, I suppose. We got some shiny loot, and Anub'arak is done.
I don't usually speak ill of the dead, but that guy really bugged me.
With the mightiest hero selected, the main event was upon us. High atop Icecrown Citadel, there sits the Lich King, waiting for those poor souls to fight their way through his halls, and then confront him.
Amidst Northrend's frozen wastes, the champions of the Argent Tournament laid siege to Icecrown Citadel. After vanquishing countless minions of the dead, our heroes stood ready to face the wrath of the Lich King.
By the time they reached him, they were exhausted, battered and enraged, just as the Lich King had planned. His true prize now stood before him, the most powerful heroes of Azeroth. The fate of the world, it rested upon this single moment. The Lich King unleashed his full fury, while Tyrion Fordring and his champions, they fought back in a valiant battle that shook Icecrown Citadel to its foundations. Especially those that sneaked in some engineering bombs. The Lich King, he ripped several heroes' souls from their bodies with his legendary Frostmourne, but even that did not stop them. The champions trapped in the Curse Blade, they fought on, stirring the spirits imprisoned in the sword to action. But despite their valor and their heroism, the champions could not prevail. The Lich King's strength was simply overwhelming. Tyrion was subdued in a block of ice, and his followers were slaughtered.
Light, grant me one final blessing. Give me the strength to shatter these bonds.
The Lich King had done it. The Lich King had won the battle. He started to raise his foes into undeath, but Tyrion, he refused to give up. The light answered his prayers one last time, and he broke free from his icy prison. With a desperate blow, Ashbringer shatters Frostmourne, and in an instant, the souls trapped within the blades, they're released. They're swarming around their tormentor, repaying his cruelty with righteous vengeance. The spirit of his father, King Tyrannus, he brings the spirits of our fallen heroes back to life, and together, they start whacking at Arthas like he's a freaking piñata. In his dying moments, Arthas felt the corruption of the Frozen Throne fading away from him, and he was faced with the enormity of his crimes. He slipped into death, into a cold and unforgiving afterlife of darkness. I loved learning how to solo this fight when it became available, and the many different phases that the Lich King throws at you to overcome each and every step, it was beautiful. Now when people ask me, should they bring Arthas back? My answer is probably no, considering that this was one of the times where they really got it right. Start to finish, the story of the Lich King is a favorite amongst many. I'm sure that reliving this fight is going to be awesome as well, not to mention that new expansion is coming up. As we all know, there must always be a Lich King. And it was Bolvar that took up the job of Jailer of the Damned. He keeps the restless Scourge in check, while our adventure, it flows into the next trip down memory lane, the memories of the Cataclysm.
Bolvar said not to tell anyone what happened up there, but I think we can make an exception just this once.
As with the Cataclysm, things move from chilly and cold to fire and death. You all remember the pre-event where the entire zone, it would just light up in fire, and your charred corpse would be rewarded with an achievement? Yeah, it was pretty great to actually have people seek out Deathwing in the hopes of becoming part of his barbecue. This was a time in which the Black Dragon Deathwing, mad and corrupted, listening to the whispers of N'Zoth, he broke out and he caused the Cataclysm across the world of Azeroth. Their ultimate goal was to bring about the Hour of Twilight, the moment in which the old gods will break out of the prisons and rule the world once more. The landscape changed, as well as our leveling experience. All across its surface, death and destruction as it burned beneath his wings. Now these old gods, they're one of those primordial threats that the world has had. They once ruled the planets with the Black Empire. They were causing chaos, they were pitching the enslaved elemental lords against one another, they're corrupting the slumbering titan spirit inside the planets. Generally, they were having a fantastic old time until the Titan showed up. They brought order to the world to give that Titan spirit a fighting chance at life. They sent the elemental lords to the elemental planes, and then they imprisoned the old gods. That was the end of their party, which the old gods were not down with. They wanted to be set free, so whispers and corruption, it echoes out of the prisons, manipulating the minds of all those that they could get their tentacles on. All those, including Deathwing, who was not always the corrupted mad aspect as we see him as today. Once, he was a guardian of the world, an earth warder in fact, but that connection to the worlds, it made him more vulnerable to their whispers. Whispers, until nothing but madness was left. A corruption that spreads not only to Deathwing, but spread out throughout his entire dragonflight. Two of his children, Onyxia and Nefarian, it would cause a bit of trouble to the world where their dad was absent. Onyxia, for example, she infiltrated the House of Nobles within Stormwind, manipulated things in such a way that King Varian, he ended up being kidnapped. She then split him into two. One weak-willed side of him that you could easily control and manipulate. The strong-willed side that was planned to be killed off, but it escaped before she had a chance to do so, and then went on a wild adventure until the two reunited. They realized that something was wrong, that something was up. Lady Katana Prestor, she was exposed for who she really was. In turn, she kidnaps young Anduin back to her lair, where heroes ventured to battle a dragon and brought her back as proof of demise. Meanwhile, her brother, he took up residence in the upper half of Blackrock Spire, working on his experiments to create a chromatic dragonflight. These were horrible, vile things that were performed within the mountain to make the dream a reality, to combine the powers of the different dragonflights all into one. He too was confronted and defeated, his head put up on display to show the might of defection. And some of you wonder why Deathwing, why he was so angry during the cinematic.
Nefarian, son of Deathwing, was raised from death by Twilight cultists in the heart of Black Rock Mountain. Intrepid heroes such as you braved the Black Dragon Sanctum to put an end to his schemes once and for all.
The experiments he has done in the past, they pale in comparison to what reanimated Nefarian is now up to. He even has some help now from Maloriak, who was once the human Mallory, a bright young alchemist, kidnapped and fused with the corpse of a dragon spawn. The result is a bumbling minion who possesses only a dull glimmer of his former intelligence. Still, they can boast about achievements like the bosses Atramedes and Chimeron. Even his beloved sister Onyxia has been brought back from the dead to stand and fall with her brother once again.
Oh no! We left before we could loot his head! Sorry about that.
In the lower section of the mountain, you might recall fighting against the Elemental Lord Ragnaros. He was there, accidentally summoned in ages past by the Dark Iron Dwarves, and already quite a threat to the world. We pushed him back to his elemental plane of fire, which is called the Firelands. With the Cataclysm, Ragnaros also makes a return, now allied to Deathwing and the Old Gods, to burn the world asunder.
Though thwarted by mortals once before, Ragnaros returned to Azeroth and sought to consume it in flame. It was up to heroes like you to venture into the Firelands and permanently snuff him out.
The World Tree Nordosil, healing after the events with Archimonde during Warcraft 3. That's what they set their eyes on first. Zoth believes that the World Tree, burning it down, would deal a blow to the world from which it would never recover. The initial attack is pushed back. Efforts were made to heal Nordosil at a faster rate. Eventually, the Cenarian Circle, they storm into the Firelands and carved out a stronghold known as the Molten Front. You remember doing these dailies here, where you could choose the path of quest that you wanted to each and every day. It was kind of fun. No reinforcements from the Horde and the Alliance, they soon joined the Cenarian Circle. Slowly, ever so slowly, they pushed deeper into the Firelands until they reached Sulfuron Keep. Ragnaros' blazing citadel, secure in his own domain. Ragnaros, he believed himself to be beyond the reach of simple mortals. He did not count on being literally dragged out of his hot tub and forced to stand and face us. Quite literally, as they decided to give the Fire Lord some legs. By taking him out in his own domain, we actually removed him as the ruling Lord of Fire. By now though, after the events of Legion and the Shaman Order Hall, a new Fire Lord sits on the throne.
I guess Ragnaros came back to our world a little too soon.
And as the final memory, the final boss of the Cataclysm time periods, there is the Ogre Chogall. He's not native to Azeroth. He actually joined Gul'dan during that first invasion of the Hordes. But the Ogre Mage, he had already quite a connection to the old gods. As far back as living on Draenor, there it was where he learned through the Naru and the Pale Ones. He learned about the Void, the Hour of Twilight, and about shadow magic. Stepping into Azeroth, a world infused with these void powers, it was amazing to them. It was like destiny finding the place where they belonged. The place where they would bring about this prophesied Hour of Twilight. No wonder that cho'gall and his Twilight Hammer cult, they gladly sided with Deathwing and Zoth. He took many of his cultists to the highlands, where they carved out a fortress in the heart of the region. Cho'gall, he named the stronghold the Bastion of Twilight, and he fashioned it into the cult's base of operations, and a place for its members to worship the unseen gods. Void energies gradually bled from the spire, creeping across the terrain and mutating all life that passed beneath its shadow. The land itself, it warped and darkened, and the region, it soon became known as the Twilight Highlands.
From within the sinister Bastion of Twilight, Cho'gall commanded his servants to usher the old gods into our world. Thankfully, heroes like you took up arms and fought the maniacal cult leader face to face to face.
Recruitment to the cause, with the promise from Dark Whispers to back them up. It made Cho'gall's cult quite huge. All layers of society that were infiltrated by them, so his death, it did not mean the end of the cult, nor the end of their schemes. There was the Twilight Father, for example, Archbishop Benedictus, ready to take over after the Ogre's fall. On higher difficulties, a little secret was revealed. The secret as to what goes down in the bowels of the Citadel. However, this is where the last boss of our trip through time ends. This is where Cho'gall falls.
2 heads aren't always better than one.
And that's where the anniversary ends as far as it comes to the greatest hits in World of Warcraft, facing off against bosses of the past. The event itself, that carries on for quite a little while longer, so you can level up some alts quicker, grind out those reputations, get some sweet Time Walker rewards. 15 years, everybody. How time flies. It was kind of fun poking at these bosses in the different phases. Personally, I don't recall many of them, as my hardcore raiding days, they died off the classic. Haven't picked it up again in Battle for Azeroth though, but you know, an occasional raid night best left forgotten in between. The bosses, seeing them again, was kind of fun. Now having them as proper time walking bosses, that'd have been absolutely amazing. But all the same, it was a fun night out with the guildies, and the mount is really awesome. 15 years. According to YouTube, I created this channel back in 2007. But back then, it was mainly to upload some videos about our guild events. We had screenshot contests, duels in the Gurubashi arena, which then ultimately flowed into solo guides. You remember those with the intro like da 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 da. Had to bring them all down because of the copyrighted music. And then, you know, eventually the lore videos as we know them today. I've been doing this crazy YouTube thing full time now since Warcraft Draenor, which I think is 2014. So 5 years of sharing my passion, telling the stories, living the dream. Honestly, I've said this many times now, but I would have never dreamed to be where I am today. And I got you to thank for that. I always sit down and try to make these thank you videos, especially around the Christmas time, but the words, they just never seem enough, man. It's unreal. It is truly unreal to have so many of you sit down and enjoy the videos on a weekly basis, to share your passion, to see comments of people like, hey, Noble, this is wrong, or you're talking funny, or, you know, maybe you could talk about this subject, and all of them are so appreciated. You have no idea. People sharing the videos, talking about the lore, debates on the Discord channel. 5 years now, everybody. 5 years you've been letting me live this dream, and I hope that that's long, strange journey, I hope it's going to be so much longer. We of course have Shadowlands on the horizon, still so many stories left to tell. Who knows where the future's going to take us. But for now, as always, thank you so much for joining me, everybody. You could subscribe if you like my videos, maybe even leave a like if you enjoyed this one. And until next time, see ya!